Alex Burghart, you drew blood this week with your motion to release government files relating Lord Mandelson's appointment to Washington. What do you actually hope to see in those files?
I think we hope to see exactly who knew what and when. But to a certain extent, Trevor, we've already heard the most dramatic piece of evidence, which was in Prime Minister's questions just beforehand, when Kemi Badenoch asked the Prime Minister directly whether he knew that Peter Mandelson had an ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein when he appointed him to be ambassador in Washington. And for the first time, the Prime Minister admitted that he had. He said yes. And this obviously throws the Prime Minister's judgment into the most sort of serious question, to the point where it's clear that a lot of people in his party no longer trust him.
To be fair, he did say that he knew, but not everything.
He'd also told us what he did know, which was that Mandelson had had an ongoing friendship which had crossed over the point of conviction, and that he had accepted Epstein's hospitality even whilst the latter was in prison and when he came out.
But
it's just, this is in the court of the House of Commons and in public opinion, and I suspect within the Labour Party, this is unacceptable.
But the thing is, we know what we know. From your point of view, is indeed, as you've just said, what the Prime Minister knew was enough, as it were, to condemn him. Mandelson's gone.
He knew enough that he should never have appointed him.
What is the point of continuing to push with this?
Because this is about the Prime Minister's judgment. This is a very, very serious thing, right? The most senior diplomatic post that we have to offer is the ambassador's position in Washington. And the Prime Minister knowingly put someone in who was compromised. That is wrong. And the Prime Minister must ultimately take responsibility for this. And at the moment, he's refusing to do so.
So is it your case that Keir Starmer is not fit to be Prime Minister, and therefore will you be presenting a confidence motion in the hope of getting him sacked?
I think that the Prime Minister's position is untenable. I think that the Prime Minister...
That's not quite the same thing as saying that you do not think he is fit to be Prime Minister.
I've never thought he was fit to be Prime Minister, Trevor. What I'm saying now is that I don't think his position is politically tenable. Now, look, we don't have majority in the House of Commons. We can't win a vote. What Kemi has said is that because a lot of Labour MPs supported our motion on Wednesday to release these papers, and it was very striking, I was in there, I led that debate, I was in the Commons for 6 hours, and nobody stood up to defend the Prime Minister. And when I say nobody, I mean nobody on the Labour benches stood up to defend the Prime Minister. Angela Rayner stood up to agree with Kemi that the Intelligence and Security Committee should be given the information. It was very striking. You know, the House of Commons, as you know, has, on certain days, it has a mood, and that mood sets the tenor for what will come. And that was one of those days. I think the Prime Minister's position is untenable. Kemi has said, if Labour MPs want to come and talk to the Conservative whips about tabling a motion of no confidence, we would absolutely have that conversation. But without those conversations, there's no point in us doing so.
You're not going to win that
Not
vote,
without the support of Labour MPs, but it's very clear that a lot of Labour MPs no longer have confidence in the Prime Minister.
One thing that may change, we've seen some of this morning, is the issue of payments on termination to Peter Mandelson. Are you planning to challenge that?
I think something that's very unsatisfactory about this is that we've been asking since Peter Mandelson was dismissed in September, since Kemi put the Prime Minister under great pressure, given the revelations about Peter Mandelson's relationship with Epstein, he was forced to get rid of him. We've been asking what the terms of this severance were, and the government has repeatedly refused to disclose those terms in a way that is just utterly wrong, given the need for transparency in this case. I understand there's a story in the papers about it being, under the circumstances, quite a considerable payoff. Let's get this all out in the open now, and let's deal with it.
But in principle, what are you saying? That you think he shouldn't have the money, or that the government should stick to whatever the employment terms were?
Look, the government will have had its employment terms, but I think most people would think if you've been sacked for lying and for having inappropriate relationships, you shouldn't be getting severance terms like everybody else.
Underlying all of this is the question not just of whether Peter Mandelson himself behaved in an unacceptable way, but the question of whether someone of his type should have been appointed in the first place. That is to say, there was already a career diplomat there who we are given to understand would have been happily stayed in post. But the government wanted a political appointee on the grounds that with the, let's call it, unorthodox approach of the White House to international affairs, who could work for Britain in the best way possible. Do you now disagree that there should have been a political appointment?
No, I've got no problems with governments making political appointments in certain circumstances to roles like this. But again, there have been some very good political appointments to diplomatic posts in the past. But obviously, when the Prime Minister decides that they're going to do that, it makes it absolutely their responsibility to get it right. It was Keir Starmer's responsibility to get this absolutely right, and he failed, and he must take responsibility for that.
So probably right analysis, do the politics, but wrong person.
The execution was a disaster.
One aspect of this, which I think it's always easy to forget, of course, and people say in a rather performative way, you know, we've got to remember the women and so on and so forth. But in practice, when this choice was made, there were many people saying, think about the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Is Peter Mandelson, even in that, whatever his talents and capabilities, in that context, the right person? Do you think that enough weight was given to the opinions and the position of the women and girls concerned in this decision?
Well, I think that if the Prime Minister had stopped to think about what he was doing, he would not have made the appointment. And we now know that all of the evidence was in front of him, or enough evidence was in front of him when he made the appointment. The New Statesman had a piece on Wednesday which had seen the Cabinet Office due diligence report. It raised three concerns. The first concern was that Mandelson had been fired twice and that this was a red flag. The second concern was Mandelson's business dealings with Global Counsel, which had
that
dealings...
was a firm of which he was chairman.
A firm of which he was chairman, which had dealings in China and Russia, and the Whitehall was very concerned about that. And the third was his ongoing friendship with Jeffrey Epstein and Epstein's totally unacceptable and convicted behaviour with young women. And so all of this derives from the awful behaviour of Jeffrey Epstein towards young women. And the people who helped Jeffrey Epstein get rich by providing him with contacts and information are ultimately complicit in what Jeffrey Epstein did with that money, which was to control young women and supply them to men across the world in the most despicable way.
Are you suggesting that Peter Mandelson was in some way complicit with Epstein's crime?
It appears that he helped Jeffrey Epstein get richer than he was. And I don't know what Peter Mandelson did and didn't know. He certainly denied that he knew about Epstein's dealings with child prostitution. But he would have known after the court conviction.
OK, well, Lord Mandelson's not here to explain himself, but he says that he feels he's done nothing wrong and was not in any way aware of any of these issues.
Peter Mandelson said a lot of things that subsequently turned out not to be true.
Gordon Brown has proposed a new anti-corruption commission. Do you think that's a good idea?
I mean, look, it depends what that commissioner would do and what their powers were and who they were. I think it's very easy for politicians to, in a moment like this, say, if there was only one additional role, everything would be fine. What's happened in this instance is that the Prime Minister had a clear choice, he had clear information, and he made a bad decision. And ultimately, there's nothing that can really guard you against that. If you're someone, like the Prime Minister is, with poor judgment, your own poor judgment will drag you down. It doesn't, you can't outsource that. Okay. There's certain things when you're Prime Minister, you simply can't outsource to other people.
Just one last question. I noticed this week that your leader, making a speech, was asked whether she admired any members of the Labour cabinet, and she said the only one she admired was Shabana Mahmood. Is that the same as saying that Shabana Mahmood is the only one she's afraid of?
No, definitely not. And I think...
Are you afraid of the whole lot of them?
No, right now I'm not afraid of any of them, Trevor. And but I think that Shabana Mahmood is someone who is trying to do something against the grain of what her party actually want, and there's some bravery in that. But no, look, this, I'm afraid, some people will find it quite sad, but this administration under Keir Starmer has failed. It has U-turned, I think, 14 or 15 times now. It has had 2 resets in the past 5 months, and it is now caught up in the worst political scandal of my lifetime. And it's time for a new type of politics. I think that type of politics is embodied by Kemi Badenoch, who is honest, straight-talking and decent. And I'm very proud to be part of her shadow cabinet.
I'm afraid we've probably got to wrap this up now, but of course you know that there will be people shouting at the television saying 14 years, Tories, all that.
This is a new leadership. This is a new team around her. And I say one of the reasons why I backed Kemi in the first place was because of her integrity and her honesty.